Hello, today we'll be talking about how to digitize your drawings using Adobe Capture, Adobe Illustrator, and we'll go into an example with Blender at the end. So, digitizing drawings. Often in graphic design, it's a lot easier to work with pen and paper sketches than trying to draw something out, especially if you don't have the equipment. So if you're a traditional artist and you like sketching things with pen and paper, we can use this workflow with Adobe Capture, Adobe Illustrator to create something like what you see here on the left, a pen and paper drawing, and be able to use it in your graphic design. So a workflow that I've gone through before is where I draw something like on the left, I'll refine it so that it's just lines like in the middle. And then use Adobe Capture to turn it into a vector. And from the vector, I'll clean it up in Illustrator. And then I'll use it in Photoshop or any kind of graphics program. So the first step is obviously sketching your drawing. Some tips would be to use high contrast. If you can use ink, black ink, that'd probably be best on white paper, but whatever you're most comfortable with, try to clean it up. I didn't do a very good job here because there's a lot of like these scratch marks, but we'll take this example and see how far we can take it. So once you have your sketch drawn, we can use Adobe Capture, which is a free app on the App Store, the Google Play Store. And you just need a free Adobe Creative Cloud account, and you can get started. So the first thing you'll notice when you open the app is there's a camera, and you'll just want to center your drawing, get a nice straight angle on it, and you can tap the screen to freeze so we can mess with these controls at the top and bottom here. So the bottom slider is the most important. It's the exposure, and you'll want to slide that to the left and the right to find the best location so that you can see the lines that you sketched. As you can see, if you have it all the way where the exposure is really high, you start to lose detail, and then when it's too low, then you get shadows that show up. So you want somewhere in the middle. Moving on to these controls up here, there's a button at the top that lets you switch between the original and the vector photo. And then there's a button right here, which is the inverse button, which lets you switch between an inverted image. There's a magic wand tool up here that auto cleans up your image. So all those little scratch marks, those can be cleaned up sometimes with the auto clean tool. And then the last setting right here is a bunch more settings where you can change the exposure, highlight, shadow, brightness, contrast, and a lot more to help you capture the cleanest lines that you have. So when you're done, you hit the check mark at the bottom of the screen, and you'll be taken to the edit menu where you can draw and erase. Right here, you can see I can erase. You can crop. So I was going to crop around the TXI logo. And then there's a smooth button, which kind of changes these jagged lines into much smoother lines. So you can still see there's a sketch-like quality, but if you compare this to the one in the middle, it's a lot smoother of lines. So once you're done there, you hit save, and it will be saved to your Creative Cloud library unless you choose somewhere else to save it. So once you have it in your Creative Cloud library, you can refine your drawing. You should go to the Creative Cloud desktop app. There's a Your Work tab, and then a My Library tab under that. And I see right here, it pops up right next to some other drawings that I did. Here's the example I showed you at the beginning. And once I open that up in Adobe Illustrator, you can see all these dots are representations of anchor points on an SVG. And it looks like there's a lot to clean up. It's not going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be. So the first trick I'm going to do is I'm going to want all this to be filled in, and I didn't want to draw it all filled in. So I just drew the outlines, but I want the actual SVG to be filled in. So the first thing I can do is I can do object compound path release, and it will fill in the lines essentially. And one thing I did include on here is that it'll include the outline filled in, and it will include the inside outline filled in too. So it'll actually make two copies, but I just deleted the inside copy. Another trick you can do is to smooth line. You right click, simplify, and it will smooth out more of these lines even more. But you can see there's still these weird sketch artifacts, but I'm going to keep those because I want this to look kind of like a sketch. I also deleted all those little island things. And once I did that, I was ready to save it as an SVG. So in Illustrator, you go to export, export as, select SVG, and export. Like I said, this logo is going to look very sketch-like, even though the actual Texas Immersive logo is very straight. So this might not have been the best effect for this logo, but this will work for anything that you want to sketch out and save as a SVG. So now that I have this SVG, what do I want to do with it? Well, SVGs are very useful because they can be rendered cleanly at any size and are designed specifically to work on the web. So raster images are made of pixels, as you can see here, and vectors are basically mathematical files that tell the computer exactly which lines to draw. So they're very useful as part of any kind of graphic design packet, like a logo kit, a press kit, a brand book. They're very useful for many things. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an advanced example using Blender to create a 3D logo. So the first thing I do is I open up Blender, I hit File, Import, SVG, and then I import the file, the SVG that I had just previously made. And as you can see, it comes in here as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different curves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a curve is just an SVG in Blender. So we want to turn this into 3D. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to join all those different curves. And we select all just by highlighting everything, dragging. And then we're going to right click and hit join, which turns everything into one curve, one SVG. And then we can right click, convert to mesh. And a mesh is what we will use to make the 3D objects. So as you can see here, I also renamed it from curve to Texas logo so that I could keep track better. If you hit tab, you'll go into the edit mode, and you can see how Blender interpreted these curves. And this looks a little bit confusing, but basically these are the faces of the geometry. And that's not going to work for us because when we want to extrude it and mold it a bit, it's going to act really weird. So I'm going to introduce a workflow that I like to use when I have really weird face geometry like this. And I want it to look like a grid so that the faces and points are more evenly spread out. So the first thing I'm going to do is add some thickness. I'll go to the gear icon you can see right here on the right, add modifier and add solidify. And I gave it a thickness of like 0.01 or 0.02 or something. And then I'm going to add another modifier. That's the Remesh Modifier. And what the Remesh Modifier does is it changes this geometry into a very organized grid where the points and faces are evenly spread out. And those are called voxels. So I chose a pretty small voxel size, 0.001. You don't want to go any lower than this because Blender will take a really long time to calculate where those faces are, and it could freeze your computer up for a good couple of minutes. So after I did that, I click on this arrow right here. I hit apply, and I apply both modifiers. It's important to apply the solidify one first, or else it'll look a little bit weirder. And so I applied the modifiers, and this is what it looks like. Essentially, it just looks like an extruded or 3D version of the sketch that I did earlier. And if we get closer to it, you can see that it doesn't look very smooth. It looks a little weird, and the side profile looks a little odd. It doesn't really truly look like a 3D object. So I'm going to use some sculpting tools to smooth out those edges. So we're going to use the smooth tool. So on the top left corner, there's an object mode button. And there's a smooth tool, and I have Blender pulled up so you can see me use that right now. See, if you can see here, these faces are basically artifacts from the remesh process, and we want to smooth those out. So right here is the smoothing tool, and what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to zoom out, and I'm just going to paint by pressing left click and just paint over all the edges, each face one by one. And as you can see, it pulls in those edges a little bit. So if we want to come look at it now, it looks a lot smoother. And the reason those faces look like that is because the object is not smooth shaded, but we can fix that in a second. So I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm going to do that on both sides. I can even do it here if I want to, but I think I'm pretty satisfied with how this looks. It already looks a lot better. You can see the reflection. If we switch it up here to viewport shading, you can see how it would look with a reflective material. I think that looks pretty nice. So I am going to check and go back to object mode so that I can right click and hit shade smooth. So now those faces that we saw earlier, those tiny faces you can see here, those will be smoothed over if you click shade smooth. And the last thing I want to do is I want to stand it upright, because what I'm about to do now is I'm about to render it. So I'm just going to hit a little shortcut, which is clicking R while the object is selected, then X, which means lock it onto the X axis, and then just type in 90, and that'll rotate it 90 degrees. And so that's a quick way to rotate things exactly. So I'll hit R, it'll go to the rotate tool, I'll hit X to lock on the X axis, and then I'll hit 90. So now it's standing up, and I want to render it. And so as part of the next part of the tutorial is basically just going to be rendering this in Blender. So in order to render things, you want to go to the shading tab up here. And as you can see here, we have the logo. It already looks pretty good. The first thing we want to do is apply a material. So I'll click Browse Material, click a new material, and it'll just pop up with this principled BSDF material. And I'm just going to play with some of these settings. You don't really have to know what you're doing too much. I'll just turn the metallic up and the roughness down. Those are the main two ones. And you can see how it would look kind of chrome-like here. I think that's pretty cool. I might add some color to it. So in the base color, let's give it a little bit of Texas orange. And yeah, we essentially have something we're ready to render. The only thing is this environment map is built into Blender, so we have to add our own. It won't render. If I hit F12, well, I need to move the camera as well. So in order to add an environment map, you have to go to Object, switch to World, and now you're editing the world around you. So we're going to add an HDRI, which we'll do just by adding a texture coordinate, this mapping function, the HDRI into the world output. And basically what an HDRI is a 3D scan of like an environment. I'll pull up some examples of some HDRIs right now. Oh, it's going to try to open in Photoshop. But I'll copy those nodes, and I just learned this from an online tutorial. So let's add something, you hit Shift A, and I'm just going to add an environment texture. And I have a collection of environment textures that I have downloaded. Just a bunch of random graphics. Oh, so here is what those photos look like. Basically 3D scans. And that one looks nice. So that one is called that. And so I'll add that there. I'll send that to the world surface. I want to hit use nodes here as well. And then I will add, it's not going to show up correctly because I need to add a vector here to orient it essentially. So I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm just going to search for texture coordinate. And this will orient the texture in space essentially. So I'll connect that there. And one setting I need to make sure is that the film is not set to transparent so I can see it. But I'm not seeing it show up. So I think I need to set the material to use nodes. Oh, I think I have to add this mapping node. Let me try a different texture. These are different render shading kind of like previews up here that you can use. I'm not sure why that's working, but I'm gonna move on and show you how to render this like a frame you're looking at. If you like the viewport you're looking at, you can hit Control-Alt-0 and you'll see this little frame pop up. And that you can adjust here with the camera object in your scene collection. And I'm going to go to the world tools and You can move it, the camera view around until the frame is kind of how I want it. So that will work for me for now. And then if you want to render it quickly, you can hit F12 and you'll just see a picture. But you'll notice that this picture looks different than this because from what I said earlier, this environment image is built into Blender. It's just a preview. So you need to put in your own environment image here, which I was trying to do here. Oh, use nodes. There we go. Now we see it. You have to click this use nodes checkbox in order to see it. So this is the environment texture I loaded in Cape Hill 2K. And you can find those online just by searching for HDRIs. So if I want to render this now, very nice, very cool. Little Chrome Texas Immersive logo. And that is essentially how I got from a pencil drawing on the left to a Chrome TXI on the right. And you can use that SVG for many different things. You can use it in your graphic design. But yeah, I'm going to